lifelong learning and talking about these ideas. There's a lot of creative ideas going on. One of the ways in which those creative ideas can be developed, we'd be talking about this idea of design thinking starting this last fall, and John and Lauren did such an awesome job kind of breaking that down for us and kind of showing us how that could work, what that might look like. And today we're going to get our hands dirty a little bit. It sounds like we're actually going to practice this. We'll work on this. So I hope we all have ideas to kind of workshop and begin to start talking about this and maybe some like what this might actually look like in practice. So that should be exciting. I'm just glad to have everybody here on a busy Holy Week, I'm sure, for many of you. Just by way of announcements, just to let everybody know, we will, if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, that's probably the easiest way to stay involved with things that are going on. And we also have a Facebook page, and we try to announce things. We also curate resources occasionally, and we'll put things out if members have lifelong learning events that they are doing that they want the general public or other lifelong learning leaders to share. Then you can ask us to forward that along on our Facebook page, and oftentimes we will. There was Daryl Stevens is one of our members, for instance, and mentioned that there is a conference on May 14th on embracing multivocational ministry. So that certainly is a big topic right now in theological education, and a major piece of this is how to understand ourselves as multivocational, which is certainly a term being used more by students of theological education. So so there's information on that. I think we'll add that to the Facebook page here soon. I think that's the plan. We also have a Slack page if people are interested in joining the Slack community. I'll put some of these links here in the chat as we go so that people can stay connected. And of course, the newsletter is always probably that's always been a good way to stay connected with us. Does anybody else have a webinar or something lifelong learning related that they'd like to shout out and let us know about so that we can spread the word? Okay, very cool. Well, if you do, you can always put it in the chat. You can also send it along to us at to ALLLM. You can share it on the Facebook page, like I said, or you can just email it to us, and we can spread the word. Well, without further ado, we'd like to invite John and Laura again. Just as a reminder, John Park is the director of the Doctor of Ministry program and Des Perez Chair of Congregational Health at Central Baptist Theological Seminary. He has a PhD in leadership studies and has worked with diverse ethnic and linguistic groups, both at home and in cross-cultural settings. And the Reverend Lauren Leasing serves as the Director of Leadership Empowerment of the American Baptist Home Missionary Societies. And Lauren has a distinct passion for fresh, alternative, and entrepreneurial models of ministry and the emerging leaders who pursue them. And your Reverend Ng is working on a Doctor of Ministry in Creative Leadership at Central Baptist and has a Master's of Divinity from Berkeley. So we had a wonderful time with the two of them last time. We are so pleased to have you all back with us. And without further ado, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, well, once again, thanks for having us back. And I know Lauren and I are excited to share a little bit more about the design thinking. And so, Lauren, do you happen to have any words you want to share?
Just thank you, Josh, for that introduction. Good to see all of you again, some familiar faces as well as some new faces. And yeah, I mean, John and I love this stuff. Like, it is a good day for me if I get to talk about innovation and design thinking. So I'm so excited for the time ahead. So thanks for having us back.
All right. So for the next 8 to 10 minutes, I'm going to give a brief overview or review of what we shared, what we presented last time. So because a lot of you might have forgotten about, the nitty-gritty things that I emphasized, but I just wanted to draw a big picture of what design thinking is. And last time I did use a PowerPoint, but this time I'm going to share my screen and use the whiteboard instead. And so let's see how it goes. Design thinking is about exploration, experimentation, so we'll see how it goes. Here we go. So, oops. See, I practiced this a few times, but it's not going smoothly right away. So hang on a second. So there I will draw 3 circles here. And then there's the 4th one, which I didn't intend to draw. Okay, so let me try once again. 1 and 2 and 3. Forget about that little dot. So, design thinking is about making mistakes and sometimes, fail. And also you go through a lot of iterations because it's an iterative process. So I want to start with the definition of what design thinking is. So here we go. Okay. All right, so here's the brief definition of, actually it's a long definition, but I'll try to, summarize what it's really about. So here, design thinking is a discipline that uses the designer's sensibility, right? Sensibility. So here, the key word there is designers, and also sensibility and methods to do what? To match people's needs with what is technologically feasible. So there's a, feasibility, and also what a viable business strategy can convert into customer value and market opportunity. So there's this viability. So 3 things that stand out, right? So the very first one is people's needs. In other words, it has to be something that people need to desire. So I can simply say desirability. And the second one is feasibility. And the third one is viability. So in other words, it has to be desirable. I know there's my drawing there. And then the other thing is it has to, actually, this is for money, viability. And then you have to be able to, use your, and this is, how the machines work. So it has to be feasible. Is it technologically feasible? The 3, components of the definition of design thinking is it is a human-centered problem-solving tool with a business model and with a technical feasibility. So it starts with human-centered, problem-solving tool. So I think it's always great to add out, 1 more tools to our leadership box. So in a way, design thinking adds to that leadership box, that you all have. So I think it helps us to continue to grow as a leader. And the 3 circles that I drew earlier means 3 things. So design thinking in 3 simple steps. So the first one is, and the second one is, and the third one is actually, so what are these? Maybe you might not be able to understand what I drew, okay? Design thinking is about being visual, visual as well. So try to come up with the visuals that make sense. I hope, it does make sense. So design thinking in simple 3 steps. It starts with a need or a problem. That's why I put a question mark. And then, it's the next one is ideation. So the first one is inspiration. The second one is ideation. So you generate ideas. And the third one is implementation. So there are three I's there, right? So you start with an idea, the need of people. And also you start with a problem that you like to tackle with the users. So for us, the end users might be, the people that we work with, whether they're students or they are educators, whether they are, professionals, whoever they might be. You have to think about the end users and their needs, right? And also what problem, do they identify? Because unless you identify a problem, you can't really go on to the next stage. And once you identify a need or a problem, then you go on to the next stage, which is the ideation stage, where you ideate around the need or a problem. And the next thing and the last thing is actually you implement that idea that was proven and tested through iterative prototyping. So that is the design thinking in simple 3 steps. But then I want to also have, offer 6 steps, design thinking in 6 steps. So let me clear all things. And once again, let me use this one. So this time it's a little bigger, and there are 6 steps. So once again, I'll draw a picture. This time I'll use red instead. So there's the first one, and the second one is this. And the third one is, which you already saw, and the fourth one is and the fifth one, and the 7th one. Okay, so what are these maybe drawings that you have hard time understanding? So design thinking is about understanding, right? It has to with a lot with understanding. So you have to try to understand the need or the problem. So the very first thing is empathize. You have to empathize with people. Oh, empathize. So as we all know, empathy is broken into M and pathos, right? So pathos is about feelings and emotions. And M is in. So you go into people's feelings and emotions, right? So especially regarding the need and the problem that they identify. And this empathy actually is something that you have to bear in mind and you have to have throughout the whole process. Without empathy, it's very difficult for you to actually solve the problem. Even if you solve a problem, you might still be missing the target because you're not really in tune with what people are truly feeling. And sometimes problems might evolve, right? So it's really critically important to continue to stay in tune with what people are experiencing and feeling. And the second one here is actually magnifying glass, which is so once you empathize and then you define, right? So the very first one here, you are actually empathizing, and as you empathize, you develop an understanding of the users, and as you define, you conduct research, and also you observe where the users exist, where the users experience these kinds of things. And the third one here is ideate. So again, you generate ideas, but this time, as you generate ideas, don't think about a lot of restrictions. We have a budget, limitation. We have human resource restrictions. We have this restriction and that restriction. So forget about all those restrictions, okay? So, use all the freedom that you have. So go for wild and crazy and creative ideas. And so this process to understand, and then you go explore, the whole thing about understand and explore. And so the fourth stage here in these 6 stages is this one is prototype. So I would definitely add iterative. So iterative prototyping, where you actually come up with something that is tangible and tactile. It doesn't have to be fancy and doesn't have to involve a lot of money. It's something that you can quickly, make. With anything that you have, okay? So you kind of improvise and make things visible so that people can see what this is really about, the solution that you came up with. And then what happens next is you take that prototype to your users. So this is a test stage. So you test what you came up with, right? And so the end users will give you feedback and input, and suggestions. So what do? You go back and then you make the adjustments, make modifications, right? So that's why it's called iterative prototyping. So you go back and forth several times, and then finally you get to a point where this is it, and the end users love it, and that's when you actually take off, you launch, right? So you implement, and this whole thing is materialize. And this is design thinking in 6 steps. So you empathize, you define, you ideate, and then you iterative prototyping is the next one, and you test and you implement. So you basically put the vision into effect. You launch with your idea. And Lauren last time in her presentation, she did talk about how design thinking can be theologically, one, hopeful, because we are dealing with people's problems. We are dealing with problems that are solvable. And a lot of times we ask the question, how might we? Might refers to possibility, right? There are some answers that we haven't really showed, we haven't identified. So that's why it's hopeful. And also it is incarnational, because we are dealing with people, right? You can't really solve problems apart from and away from problems. You got to be among the people, just like Jesus Christ, who incarnated himself. So he was in a person in form, meaning he came among us and lived among us by making his dwelling in our midst. And also the third thing is the transformational, because we are dealing with needs, we're dealing with the problems. So we are trying to meet the needs and try to tackle the problems. In that regard, it is a transformational. And then I would add just one more thing, and then I'll finish, and which is imaginative. You know, these days you might have heard missional churches movement and fresh expressions of churches. You know, it has a lot to do with imagination. You have to use your, holy and missional imagination, right? Because we're dealing with something that is not seen, that hasn't been identified. We're talking about the solution yet. So we go into the unknown with a lot of imagination, but at the same time, we rely on the Holy Spirit, who is on the go, who is on the move, and who is at work. As Jesus said, my Father is still at work even until now, and that is why I work. And so as we engage design thinking, we also engage in the work, the mission of God, and in that process, we use a lot of imagination. But we all know that it's a prayerful imagination. Unlike, designers and design thinkers outside of the Christian faith, they might try to use a lot of imagination. We also do that as well. But we Christians, we do it with, prayerful spirit, with reliance on the Holy Spirit. So that is the quick review of design thinking that we presented last time. So, Lauren.
I'm going to ask you a question, John, for the good of the group here.
Sure.
So at first glance, this can look like the long way around. I mean, we have new programs, new initiatives, things we want to do. And oftentimes it seems easiest to say, hey, it worked for those people over there, so let's try it here. Or I just have a hunch. I have a pretty good hunch that this is going to work. These 6 steps could, again, at first glance look like, well, this is going to take longer to do this. Can you speak a little bit to what it means to go fast or slow when it comes to design thinking process?
Yeah, so that's why I introduced the 3 simple steps first. The first inspiration, and then ideation, and then implementation. And if you want to go through those 6 steps, which is also possible. But I think in all simplicity, I think it starts with the need and problem, right? And as you empathize with that, I think you can quickly go into this ideation process, right? Because you identify a need, because everybody has a need, every organization has a problem. Once that is identified, I think you can jump into the ideation process, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Once that is taken care of, the next thing is you have to work with the people, the users, because they're the ones who know the problems, down in the trenches. It's very incarnational in that regard, because without getting to the people and getting on the nerves of the people, it's very difficult for you to even think about solving any problem at all. So once that is taken care of, I think the next thing, the natural thing would be to test it out and several times and implement it.
And having seen a lot of companies and organizations try a different method prior to learning about design thinking, it can be quite costly, both time and financial resources, to have to circle back to the people or the end user or however you want to define it at a later time, versus incorporating that incarnational component from the outset, right? So good. Well,
and
okay.
It doesn't have to be costly, as you all know. I mean, the
Correct.
prototyping doesn't have to, take a lot of time nor money. And that is what design thinking is really about. You cut down on a lot of the bureaucracies, the things that really slow down this process, the problem solving process.
Yeah. Okay. So any, I guess, kind of questions, urgent questions that anyone might have, I get for John or I at this point before we move into kind of a group activity. I want to make sure everyone's kind of starting at a similar baseline before we keep going.
Yeah, Ursula, just made a great observation. People who actually, they are the ones who live with the problem. They're the ones who, dwell on those problems. So they, are very closest to the problem solving as well.
That's right.
Thank you for the comment.
Okay. All right. Well, there's going to be another opportunity for questions and all that towards the end. And certainly you can stop us if there's something. So we want to spend the bulk of the rest of our time doing an ideation session. But in order to get there, we have to identify a problem. So my first question for you is I want you each to write down on a piece of paper or on your phone one thing that keeps you up at night with regards to the work of lifelong learning. What is one challenge, one problem that keeps you up at night with regards to this work of lifelong learning? Just take a minute to write that down.
And you can actually write it down in the chat as well.
Yeah, either one is fine. Well, that's right. Thanks, John. Yeah, because putting in the chat will make it easier for you to put them into this. So what he's going to do in a moment is going to open up the whiteboard again, and we're going to work together as a group to kind of distill, and it's going to be hard, but we're going to try to choose one question that we're going to tackle together as a group today. So let's read this. Accessibility and digital divide, yes. What will people attend and what are they willing or able to pay for? How to sustain engagement, yep, over a period of time, good. Getting instructors to take the time to design with excellent pedagogy. Yeah. How to prepare for a new era of ministry. Good. Okay, now I'm going to be kept up tonight, thanks to y'all. Okay, do people really want to learn, or do they just want to listen to people talk about content? You have to, how participatory is this, or is it spectatorship, right? So which is not in itself learning. Good point. Becoming an intergenerational community that learns. Yeah, okay. So what John's going to do, and keep adding if you haven't put it in there yet, is going to copy and paste these, however you want to do that, John, into the whiteboard so that we can begin, because there's some connections to what people are saying.
Yeah, that's what's going to help us, because we can funnel it down to one thing that we'd like to, tackle together.
Recruiting advisors to learners, supporting advisors. Can you say a little bit more about that one, Vernon, if you're willing?
Sure. We've started a design process for several certificate programs, and we're working with competency-based models. So it involves faculty advisors who are going to be engaged in conversation with learners as they pick and choose what it is that they want to attend, go to.
Got it. All right, very helpful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm seeing a couple of comments about the nature of the educators as well as the advisors, facilitators, instructors. People have used different language, and certainly there's nuance as far as the difference between all of these different labels, but on their approach to lifelong learning and how they facilitate that learning. What other kinds of trends are you seeing evident in all of these things that keep us up at night? Feel free to unmute yourself if you see something. Any other patterns you're seeing in what's in the chat? I know you guys are not a typically shy bunch, so or everyone's just tired from the Holy Week services. I don't know.
Teaching process.
Okay. Say more. Okay.
Treating, not approaching lifelong learning as working with practitioners, not students necessarily. These are, you know, and coming to that with all of the best of adult learning and accepting that the people in the room are experts, not just the presenter.
Yeah. Does that point back, Sarah, to sort of the posture of that facilitator and the instructor? What kind of posture that person enters into the space? Or are you looking at this more from the perspective of the learner?
Sometimes the institution and what they think lifelong learning should be. Sometimes the learner who has not made the leap from being a student to being a practitioner expert. Sometimes from the presenter who is used to teaching students in a degree program, and lifelong learning is not a degree program. Okay. In most places.
Yep. Okay. So I'm seeing a lot around, you know, that we talked about the format as far as, you know, accessibility and a high online and in person or both, and the format, the environment. But I'm seeing a lot of comments around what the learning experience is like in and of itself. So if we want to break that down, because in design thinking, right, we're dealing with some pretty complex problems, and design thinking encourages us to kind of address one corner of that problem. And so oftentimes it will yield insights that help us tackle the rest of the big problem. But if we kind of zero in on that, and to continue what you were saying, Sarah, what sort of corner or what puzzle piece of what you just described would be an area that you'd be interested in drilling down with an ideation session on? Would it be the learner experience? Would it be the institutional perspective? Would it be the facilitator or instructor?
It depends, but probably more the what is the goal of the course? And what outcomes do you want, or what outcomes for the learners who will be present, and the learners who are targeted in our case are practitioners.
Okay, the goal of the course. And there was another one in here that's similar to that. I mean, it's related to what is the impetus for people to come to the content, right? Do they really want to learn? Are they just listening to people? So if we were to phrase, and I'll ask somebody else to do this, so thank you, Sarah. The goal of the course was what Sarah drilled into. The objective of the offerings that we provide in lifelong learning. Somebody turn that into a question, a problem question that's specific. Can somebody do that?
Can you say that again, Lauren?
Yeah, let's take that theme of trying to figure out what is the goal or the objective of the offerings that we provide. Take that theme and turn it into a question, a problem question. Like, how might we ... or how might we improve ... or how might we offer more, you know, fill in your adjective offerings. How might we something or other? Can anyone try to take a stab at formulating a question?
How do we create an environment that facilitates lifelong learning?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
John's capturing that. Okay, that's a wonderful start. Thank you, Ursula. So how do we create an environment that fosters, did you say fosters or encourages?
Facilitates.
Facilitates. How do we create an environment that facilitates lifelong learning? Now, somebody take that question and drill it down a little bit more specific. Either break down environment into a smaller piece, break down facilitates into a smaller piece.
That either facilitates lifelong learning for in terms of personal growth and personal spiritual formation and growth, or something like that, you mean?
Or how about what engages busy church leaders in learning?
Okay. What engages busy church leaders in learning? Does that speak well to that creating the environment piece? How do people, because I like the specificity of that, Lisa, very much. So do others feel like kind of where we're trying to get to with the goals and objectives and then creating an environment is captured somehow in that question? Yeah, okay, I'm getting some thumbs up, some nods. What engages busy? What do you think of this question, John? Do we need to get drilled down even more specifically?
I think this is good enough. That's
Okay.
something that we can work with.
Okay. But I want to turn that into, because what we're looking for is not just a what, but a how might we, right? So how might we engage busy church leaders in learning? All right, we're getting some thumbs up with that one.
I was using engage to cover the pedagogical questions that were being raised. I mean, there's other verbs we could use.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out.
How might we engage busy church leaders in learning? Yeah, okay. So we're going to take that question, and this is what we're going to do. So maybe you can put that question in the chat, that final question in the chat, John. And then if you stop sharing, I'm going to share my screen. So in a moment, we are going to put you guys into small groups. And there is and we're gonna engage in 20 minutes of an ideation session. So you're gonna be in small groups, about 3 or so, 3 or more. And you're gonna take that question, and along with some of the assets that I'm going to assign to your group, you're going to ideate together on how you might answer that question that we've just determined together with the assets I provide you, and then develop a prototype, or as close to a prototype as you can. That's going to be the assignment. So talk about the question, apply the assets that I assigned to your group, and have an ideation session there. And the deliverable that you're going to come back to the main group with to report on is a prototype. And John will in a second show you what we mean by a prototype. Okay, so there's a wonderful resource that I may have mentioned back in October that's called Mission Possible, Design Thinking for Social Change. And it's actually a partnership out of the discipleship ministries for the UMC and Path One, and the two of them collaborated on this resource, Mission Possible Design Thinking for Social Change. And it's a resource that plays like a board game. And I've used it in many, many different contexts, and it's always really well received. And so one of the aspects of this is that, you can either use a question that a group has come up with as well, but they also provide problem questions in this game that address certain social issues. For instance, food insecurity or cyberbullying. I mean, all different types of things. And then you get what are called asset cards. And the group is, takes these assets and applies them to the problem, just like I've described. So what I did was I scanned in some of those asset cards onto a PowerPoint, and I'm going to assign those to you guys as a group. So you don't know what group you're going to be in yet, because Stephen's going to just throw you in there randomly. So just pay attention to what these look like. But group one's assets, oh, that just disappeared. Okay, hold on a second. I see a dark screen. Let me try that one more time. I'm going to go this way and start it this way, and then okay, hopefully this will work. All right, is everyone seeing that? Okay, great.
Yes.
So whoever is fortunate enough to be thrown into group one, breakout room one, your assets to apply to that problem are, you have an artist, you have some human capital, you have an artist, a painter or musician, a poet, a writer. You've got a storefront for 1 month. You have $500 a month of regular giving for 1 year. And you have 5 vintage bikes. Okay. And I'm just realizing right now what would be helpful is if you just take either a screenshot or a photo with your phone, just literally hold your phone up and take a picture of your screen. That might be helpful, because once you get into a group, you won't remember which of these you have. Okay, so this is group one.
I have actually put it in the chat, and the chat persists. The chat persists when you go into small groups. So open the chat and you will see it there.
Even better. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, I was gonna do that myself. Thanks, Steve.
You're fast. Okay, so this is group one. And so you're going to take these assets and you're going to try to apply them to that problem, right? Of how do we, I don't have the question here anymore. How might we engage busy church leaders in learning? Okay, if you are so fortunate to be in group two, you have 200 volunteers ready to do anything, but only available for 10 hours total. You have a civic center, performing arts location, or hotel ballroom for 6 to 12 hours. You have 5,000 pennies, and you have 100 glass jars. Okay, let me just say, this is, I hope I'm not revealing too much at the outset, but I was in a setting one time where I led a group through this game, and the problem they had was mental health, how to address mental health. And they came up with this incredible idea where they turned these 100 glass jars into luminaries that lit the path as people came together for a church event where they were sharing about mental health struggles and wellness through an arts performance. Okay, so incredible what people come up with. Okay, 100 glass jars. You got a picture of this one, Stephen? Yep. Good. Okay, group three. You've got a celebrity for one day. I don't know if this is like an A-list celebrity or a B-list, but just whatever you want. You have a celebrity for one day. You have a shipping container, $5,000, and 10 GoPro cameras. Okay. And I think based on the numbers here, I'll just do group four just in case, because I can't do the math that fast. Group four, you have a design agency for 1 week. You have a commercial kitchen, $10,000 in Kickstarter funds, and recording equipment. Okay, so luck of the draw, you'll see what group you're in, and those will be, you can open up those images as he shared, as Stephen shared. So here's some additional prompts that everyone needs to look at in this, regardless of what group you're in. Additional prompts for your small group ideation. Who are you going to work with? Okay, so as you take the problem and you take your assets, who are you going to work with? Who are the other stakeholders and partners and collaborators who you need at the table with you to solve this problem with those resources? Secondly, what other brains need picking? So this is a little different than your stakeholders and collaborators. These people aren't actually going to be doing the work with you, but they are people that you may need to advise, you may need as a thought partner or a subject matter expert. Okay, because we don't have all the answers, right? Just in ourselves. Another question or prompt, what impact will this have? How do you know your idea will solve your problem, and what will the evidence be? What else do you need to know about the problem? What questions remain? There's always going to be some questions that remain, which leads us to what are the 2 next steps you will take to keep the ball moving? So in your group, you've got this problem, you got these resources, you've addressed who your stakeholders are, what are the brains you need to pick? And we'd love for you to, if you have time, get to the point where you say, and if we were to keep this ball moving on this idea, these are the next 2 things that we would do to see that happen, okay? All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing, and then John is gonna address that deliverable, say a little bit more about what it means when we say we want you to work on a prototype.
Yeah, so speaking of deliverables or prototyping, because we want to go to the idea and how that can be actually materialized, how that can be used. And for that, you have to go to your users, right? In order to make sure that they are the ones that they would like. So before you go to the end users, you make something that they would be able to identify, that they will be able to see, oh, this is close to what we are really dealing with, what we are struggling with. So the prototypes can be in multiple forms. Since we're not dealing with products, a lot of the companies deal with products, so it's easier for them to work on. But a lot of times we are working with services, ministries, things that are intangible. So how do you actually make intangible tangible? I think that is one of the challenges that you'll have to work on as you work with the organizations. One video that I'm going to show you in just a second is actually about a prototype that this IDEO company actually worked on. It's a service, an app that they try to develop. But again, we are dealing with ministries, we are dealing with services. So what would be some things that you can do? So you could actually use a storytelling or a storyboard. You can also use a skit or some things that you can share with your groups. So one good example might be Nathan and David. Think about that context. Who would approach, David, whose anger might be kindled anytime, not like a Saul, but, again, David could be mad, and he could, be very strategic in getting you killed, like, Uriah's husband, who was, strategically placed in a place where his life would be, extinguished. So something that you could, think about. So Nathan, in his context, used, in a sense, design thinking. What did he use? He used storytelling, right? He used a metaphor. He told him a story in which Nathan the prophet talked about, 2 people, and later he finds out that he was the one who was doing this damage to the one who is poor. So that really, worked out well. So what would be the most ideal prototype that you can actually use in your context? You are imaginative people, you are creative people, you know your context, you are closest to not only the problem, but also to the solution as well. So keep that in mind as you go to your breakout session.
Do you still want to show the video, John, or?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you for the reminder.
Sure.
I almost forgot about it. Okay, here we go. Okay, there it is. So
music. So this is possible dance moves for Monster Maker. So music starts, and I'm the player, so I come in and I touch the monster, pauses, and the music stops. Monster Maker. Music. So this is possible dance moves for Monster Maker. So music starts, and I'm the player, so I come in and I touch the monster, and he gives me a special dance move. I go and touch again, and he does a different one. And it can go for as long as I want. It has a few signature moves. And when I've had enough and I'm done dancing, I touch the back button, and it pauses, and the music stops. Monster Maker. Cool. That's all I can. That's all I can.
Oops.
So I'll put the timer on. Up in the top right corner, there'll be a countdown clock, so you can see how much time you've got left. Down in the bottom right corner, there's a help button. So if you need my help, push it and it'll send me a message. Here we go.
Awesome. And I'll join thanks for putting me in there. I'll join it in a minute after you give them some time to.
So John and Lauren, you are both assigned to room 4, but if you move your mouse over the screen to get up the icons, go under the more button, look for the breakouts, and then you can join either group 1, 2, or 3 just by clicking the blue join button.
That's right. And Steve, we need to make sure that the instructions are actually in the chat, in the breakout session. Sometimes they were not there.
All they have to do is open the chat.
Open the chat.
Because everything I put into the chat, when they open the chat, they'll see the same chat.
Yeah, that's something that we need to.
Mostly smiles. That's good. I was really invigorated going around all those groups and hearing you for conversation. Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, every time people come back from breakout sessions, they come back with a smile. Yeah. So do we have everybody back? Yeah, it was such a fun to be able to actually go to 3 different rooms. If it's in-person classes, then I have to literally physically go to all these rooms and go, but then because it's a Zoom, so it was much easier for you to itinerate between rooms. And I know that you guys have been really, generating great ideas. So it'll be great if we could have each group share any deliverables or any insights you might have, gained as you went through this process. I know it's a bit similar to what we had last time, but it is a step forward in the sense that you want to work, closely with what you have. Although Lauren gave, there's imaginary things that you can work with, but those are the things that are available, in those places that you are working. And so, there are a lot of things that you can find out about what you have, like opportunities, like a SWOT is something that you can use in order to know what you have as assets, right, as opportunities, and what are some things that you are limited by. And also, we are living in such an uncertain and also uncertain times where there's a fear, so-called, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and also doubt. And so that might create some environment where people might feel very uncertain about what to do and what to learn even. Even one thing that I came to my mind as I was listening to you guys was, what are some things the church members might say about their pastors engaging learning? I know we focused on the perspective of the leaders, but there might be some other things, right, that they also need to consider. Anyway, having said that, I'd like to have each group report out to the whole group. So if let's say let's go with group 1 and then group 2 and group C, group 3.
Thanks so much. I took some notes, so I hope the group doesn't mind. I'm just gonna jump in. I think so. Let me look at our assets here again, just to look what we got here. So I know we have a storefront. We had an artist. We had some cash from donations, and then I believe there were the vintage bikes, which I think were the tricky one to figure out where the vintage bikes went. But I think the idea that we're looking at the question of engaging busy church leaders, it kind of developed. It started with the storefront, and trying to figure out like a place where ministers can play and like what maybe they could collaboratively or creatively work together. And I think we eventually kind of got into this idea of having an artist that was able to help equip people to create works of art in the community So then it was like, okay, now you've got community leaders, pastors, ministers, people who are theological leaders of various sorts in the community coming together in some way and learning, like creating art together that is local and contextual, that is having to do with the issues in the town, that is speaking to what's happening in that particular area, and that work can then be used in worship, in learning scenarios, in etc. And so that was basically from if I'm trying to distill down kind of what we were thinking. So it's still kind of like what that would look like, but it seems like a really rich idea that, first of all, you have ecumenical collaboration, you have collaboration around art that potentially breaks down some barriers in the community. And then of course you also have art itself playing this role of testimony and witness to what's happening in the community, and all of that kind of working together in kind of an interesting way. I also think of maybe a fairly, I think people would really like this, actually. I think, there's communities that would really be into the idea. So I think the next two steps that we looked at maybe like what other experts, consultants, and I think the idea being find people who are in the community and maybe in other forms of life and business outside of the church to see what kinds of wisdom they can bring to the process, particularly those who are aware of what's going on in the community, and also people who can look at think about this from a lifelong learning perspective and how this can be applied, how lifelong learning can be applied in this scenario. And then like probably just practicing, right? Like the next step would be to like try to, without nailing down every single bit here of creating a space for art, doesn't have to be perfect. So maybe we have a community that we could just begin to try something with and get kind of a sense of what comes out of that, and what's really fruitful as a part of that, out of that process, and that might help sharpen what that would look like in other contexts.
Yeah, that is, I think, fantastic idea. And also toward the end, as you mentioned, iterating some of the things that you came up with, and see how that goes. Because a lot of times we are so bound by this perfectionism. We have to get everything ready 100%, then we'll launch. But a lot of times that doesn't really work that often. So they say that if you are like 70 to 80% ready, try to do something and see how that goes. If it does fail, that's okay. And this quick prototyping is about starting on a small scale. We don't go on a large scale. So do something on a small scale and see how it goes, and then see whether you could meet some of the needs that have been identified during that experimentation process. So thank you, and let's move on to the second group. Room 2 or Group B. We have none from let's see, who are the second group? So anyone from yes, room
Looks like
2.
Andrew's gonna take it.
I guess I was waiting. I didn't want to jump in, but one of the things we were trying to think through is just how can we utilize these 200 people that we have. And so one of the thoughts we had was to prepare and train them and send them out so that they would be able to do some ethnographic interactions with busy church leaders to find out what some of the needs are, and what some of the things are that are keeping church leaders busy, some of the training needs that they may think that they have, that we would then also partner with some of the area Christian colleges and seminaries. We chose, since we have the ability to use a facility for up to 12 hours, we thought, well, we'll pick Kansas City as an area where we could use a convention center there, and that we would work in conjunction with a number of the other Christian colleges and universities and seminaries, that they would be able then to set up booths in in that convention center, and that they would be able to share some of the things that they are learning. But then as all the people who come back, our 200 volunteers come back with the ethnographic information that they get, that they would be able to then share that, so that together there would be opportunities for us to keep developing better training opportunities that would help the busy church leaders and help them be able to reach out even better to the communities where God's called them. So I think that's the highlights, right, guys? Anything else that you want to add? All right, get at least a couple thumbs up. So okay, that's good for us then for right now.
Yes, thank you, and let's move on to the last group. Group C.
Right. So I was elected to represent. Actually, there wasn't a vote, so I don't know, but there was a discussion. Yeah, so our group, we have the GoPros, we had a shipping container, we had celebrity, and some money, I think. So our plan is to take the shipping container and drop it off in the different parking lots of different judicatories or other kind of regional bodies, and do these cycles in which the GoPros are sent out into the community and people are asked to shoot themselves, saying what they wish they had known some years ago at the beginning of their ministries and how they went about learning it. And then we had a couple of ideas about what to do with those next. One idea was that they would be sent from pastor to pastor and they would have a chance to see what the person before them did and create a kind of blockchain of learning. But another idea was just to take them all back into a kind of a central cloud and do some kind of textual analysis to sort of see the links and ideas as they emerge and create some kind of new artifacts or new kind of artistic expressions as a synthesis of those. And then the final piece was figuring out what to do with the celebrity. So we assumed this would be a church celebrity, somebody who's maybe a charismatic pastor or church leader. And so perhaps they would be asked the same kind of question around what they have learned in their ministry and how they go about learning it. And maybe we use them to create buzz around the event and kind of, so at the end of the cycle of having these GoPros there, people would then be presented with the kind of product of their particular judicatories learning. We also thought it'd be important that the shipping container be a place people can visit and experience community and maybe see the editing process as it unfolds, see displays of the videos that have been done so far, things like that. So that's what we came up with.
Awesome. I think, all those ideas and the deliverables are fabulous. And one thing that I think you might want to work on in the future as you work with your group, your own, ministry setting group, is to actually do something tangible, right? So far, we have been talking with the words and ideas, right? And prototyping is about actually getting dirty. I mean, Josh mentioned earlier in our program that you might have your hands, dirty. So what are some prototypes that you can actually come up with?
Oh, right? That's easy. I'd start off with like taking some cardboard and making a shipping container.
Yes, that will work. Yeah, something like that. Yes.
Right. And then like create like little speech bubbles on toothpicks. And then maybe take different pieces of fruit like kiwis to be the different pastors, and they could even identify pastor types. These are the full-time pastors, these are the young ones, these are the old ones, so forth. And they kind of they're coming up to the shipping container, and yeah, sure.
Awesome. Yes. Lego
people. Yeah. That's a good one. Actually, Lego people are cheating, Sarah, I think, because they're already formed as people, right? So there's less kind of information or choice made in creating those, because you're just repurposing. But if you take like a piece of fruit or some other representational object, it actually encodes more information in the display, right? So good thinking though to save time.
Right. And just one quick comment is like when you try to come up with this prototype, when you try to bring image or the intangibles into tangibles, I guess, try to speak the language of the people that you work with. You might be familiar with the 5 love languages, right? So try to use the prototype language that your constituents are familiar with, instead of try to use a language that they are not really speaking in. So what would be the things that they might feel familiar with, or something that they want to hear? With that, I think we might have to open it up for any questions, before our time ends.
Yeah, can I squeeze one thing in here too? Yes. That John and I participated in a design thinking exercise facilitated by somebody else, where after small groups of us came up with ideas on a new ministry program or initiative, we were encouraged to actually come up with a flyer that advertised this thing and take that flyer around to real people and ask them, would you come to this? And the funny thing is, we weren't actually planning to deliver on the experience. And you could say, well, that feels a little bit disingenuous or kind of tricky, you know, or sly to kind of say, hey, there's this thing that's going to happen, and actually it's not going to happen. I just want to see what your reaction was. But that's okay. That's part of that design thinking process, because you can say, well, now that I know that so many people would be interested in partaking in this experience, we're actually going to probably put some feet to it and make it happen. But that's another example of how you can prototype and data collect without having to actually put the full force of your staffing and resources behind delivering on the thing quite yet. Just go get a feel for what people actually respond to and how. Okay, yeah. Any other questions from anybody?
I have one. Is there a secret to getting to the real root of the reason why they might want to or not want to do something? Like sometimes you begin a query and a process with the prototyping, and you sort of, right, you try to find out what's the resistance, and they give you a reason, but it's not the real reason. You have to like dig. So how do you quickly get to the real reason?
Yeah, I think, you know, early in the process, something that you have to do is observation, and you have to develop an understanding of who your users are and observe where they actually live and where they exist. And also, sometimes they say something in response to your question, but in real life, when they go back to their own life, you know, they actually do something else. So you gotta close the gap. And that's why I think you have to be able to make observations of the people that you work with or the problems that you will try to identify with. You know, one example, IDEO actually conducted some things in order to solve a problem. Let's say, you know, Target wanted to create a shopping cart. And this really happened, right? So IDEO, you know, got to the action quickly. And what they did was they actually went to these Target stores, right? And then they observed what these customers do and how they are dealing with the shopping carts and how they actually break them, how they actually use them. And then they were able to come up with a shopping cart that is sturdy, that is flexible, that is also very friendly with the customers. And so that observation process early on, I think is really important, because, you know, people don't tell the truth 100%. And that is why you got to get into their mind and their heart and also their life to see what is really happening. And with that proper identification or diagnostic of what is going on, I think you might be able to come up with something that really works.
I'll share another illustration, Jeff, that I think I may have shared with some of you in October. So if it's a repeat, I apologize. But IDEO also, their nonprofit arm, worked with a bank in Mexico. And the bank was trying to figure out why a particular community in Mexico wasn't opening savings accounts. And so they were like, you know, we don't think it's because they're not saving, but for whatever reason, this is not a product that is of interest to this constituency. So IDEO went in and met with, just observed, as John was saying, when it was invited into people's homes and said, hey, show us a little bit about, you know, where do you keep your money? And what they found were that families in this community in Mexico were keeping money in a jar on the shelf in their kitchen. And on the outside of it, it said, you know, vacation. And then they were keeping, you know, a shoebox of money underneath the mattress. And on that, it said, you know, Isabella's quinceañera, right? Like, so what they started to realize from those observations and being invited so graciously into people's homes to do those observations was it's not that people aren't saving. It's just that they don't, this community didn't save for saving's sake. They don't save just to save. They save towards something momentous, an occasion, an event in their community and in their family culture. And so then that was they were able to inform this bank to say, instead of developing a product that's just about saving for saving's sake, develop a product that's all about saving towards something of significance. And all of a sudden it changed, right? So just another way to explain what John was talking about. But great question, Jeff. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for those answers. It sounds like you need to sort of see how people live, and that includes how professionals live and spend their time. And the more you sort of see where it's going, the more you see what their priorities are and what their frustrations are or satisfactions are, and work from there.
That's
right
correct.
on, right
Yeah.
on. You know, just like our pastors used to say, if you show me your checkbook, I know what you're really passionate about, right? So if you could observe how they actually live, then you will know what their priorities are and what their passions are.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Probably have time for one more question.
Yeah.
Or even an observation or insight you had from our time together today.
An observation. I think we're a pretty creative and energetic group of people. And lifelong learning in a lot of institutions often can be innovators. And we are often, because of the need to produce and to be accountable, often discouraged from being innovators and taking risks. So how, I see this as an affirmation for continuing to do that and to test the prototypes. And yeah, you can't lose money all the time, but do it.
I love that. And I love that, Sarah. That'll preach, actually, because one of the things I like to say too is that, the first characteristic or quality God revealed about God's self was creativity. And so it's a way for us as people of faith as well to be brought full circle back to that innate imprint of the Spirit that we have on us to be creative and to bring that into our work as well. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's pretty much the balance of our time. It's so thank you, John. Yes, please reach out to us. I know I've gotten a couple of emails even during this last hour from some of you, so I'm so excited to keep the conversations going. You know where to find us. And again, thank you for the invitation to come back. But as we said before, John and I just love talking about this stuff. So please see our doors as open. And John, do you have any closing remarks you wanted to share?
As I wrote in the chat, this is something that you need to continue to work on, explore, and experiment with, because unless you actually get into action, design thinking will not really be developed in you. So designers, as I said in the definition of design thinking, you have to use the designer's methodology and their sensibility. They actually go through a lot of iterations, right? They draw this and then discard it, draw it again and again and again and again. There's so many iterations, and sometimes you go, wow, how can they go through so much? But we need to be a little more experimental in the sense that we really want to solve these problems. If we are really serious about solving a problem or meeting a need, I think we need to be really serious and get into action. And we are people of action. We are people of faith. So I'm sure that there is much room for design thinking. So thank you once again for inviting us back and sharing a little bit more about design thinking.
Yay! Thank you all very much. Lovely. Thank you all so much for being here, and we will have a recording of this session available soon online, and we really appreciate everybody being here, and especially thanks again to John and Lauren. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you again.
Everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
Easter.
Happy Easter.